Great. Welcome, everyone. This is the Joint Legislative Management Committee meeting happening on October 2nd. We have an agenda today that we take up 3 different topics. We are going to introduce Kevin Williams first, though. So we'll start with our new interim Capitol Police Chief, and then we'll go to the State House renovation conversation. And then we'll move to committee discussion. So with that long-awaited introduction of Kevin, please join us. And Janet, if you'd help with the introduction, that would be great. Come up.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here to introduce Kevin Williams, who's joining us on his first day here at the state capitol. So there's been a lot going on. Kevin and I discussed his title today and what the best way to go about that. So we've changed it a little bit to the interim director of the Capitol Police.
Okay.
And that's the way we're introducing him. Kevin's distinguished career and experience on organizational management, safety, security, and police operations throughout the country proved to be the best fit for our search for an interim leader. Kevin's educational background includes Command College graduate, University of Phoenix Masters of Arts in Organizational Management, Mercy College of Detroit BA, and an AA in Law Enforcement and Corrections. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. Kevin has served as the interim chief director of the campus safety for Keene College. So he has seen a snowflake or two, right? Police chief and director of public safety for the University of Michigan Dearborn. Police commander for Arizona State University Police Department. And his industrial career of police lieutenant too for the Los Angeles Police Department. And these are just some of the achievements and experiences that Kevin brings to the table. Kevin also has volunteered his services to various organizations and has been a guest lecturer and speaker for various schools, colleges, and universities. Kevin will be helping us with the assessment of the Capitol Police and the hiring of our new chief. So please welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
So great to have you here.
Hey, I prepared some brief remarks. The sergeant at arms was nice enough to tell me to keep it to 3 hours. That's how much time we have. So thank you. Let me get started. Actually, she said most of the things that I was going to say. I do have 3 college degrees. I have a passion for law enforcement because I really didn't like the way that it was done when I was growing up in Detroit, Michigan. And I kept complaining to my mother and saying, you know what, I think it could be done better. And so she said to me, well, if you think so, then why don't you become one? And I applied. She said, oh, no, I didn't actually mean that. And I've been doing it ever since. I have a personal mission statement I'd like to share with everybody. And it's one that I've adopted at each of the departments that I've led. We exist, and I'm talking about law enforcement, police, and I truly believe this. We exist for the purpose to serve and to protect others. And if each and every law enforcement officer actually understood that and believed that, we would have a quality of policing in the United States that's a tad bit different than what we've been seeing. Okay? I absolutely believe that our purpose to exist is to serve and to protect other people. That's what you will get from me during my entire time here. It was mentioned that I've led a number of departments. I've actually led 5, and I'm retired from LAPD after 20 years. There, I managed a $22 million budget. In another agency, I managed a $27 million budget. So I'm familiar with budgets. I've had up to 395 employees. I've overseen internal investigations. I led jails for 12 and a half years in 2 different states. And that helped me to understand why it's so very important that our law enforcement professionals be able to respectfully engage with others. Because if you can't do that in a custody environment, you're probably going to get beat up as a law enforcement officer. So we learn how to talk to people and do that well. And I think that's something we should be doing. To me, my number one priority is the safety and protection of all human beings. In this particular case here at the Capitol, that means our guests, that means our employees, our staff, our elected leaders. That's our function here as a police department, is to protect the people who are here. I have three things on my to-do list so far. This is my first day. And I say that my complete list will be defined by my boss, the Sergeant at Arms. I'm here to assist with finding a new police chief. And then my last one is to get to know Senator Kitchell very well, since she manages the money. So I'll be knocking on your door. But anyway, I consider this an opportunity. I'm a transparent sort of fellow. I'm not perfect, but I've had the privilege of serving now in 6 different states in a leadership position. And you don't get there thinking the world revolves around you. I am here to serve you, everybody watching, everybody listening, everybody in the room. That is my purpose here, is to serve. And I look forward to answering any questions. If whenever asked, you will find me to be very receptive, and I consider it an honor and a privilege to sit here today. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're so happy to have you finally here. It's been a journey, and we know we'll be able to accomplish a lot together. So we are here as a resource. I know we'll be working closely together, but I hope you get settled in well, and we'll be talking soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, members, we are now going to move into continuing our discussion around State House renovation. So if Mike, if you can share the PowerPoint. I did a little slide deck. I thought maybe a visual with so many people, us being scattered, would be an easier way to follow. So at our last meeting, we got a presentation from BGS. We heard from our Sergeant at Arms. We heard from staff about the needs for the building, and we want to start focusing in on what our next steps are. So taking notes in our last meeting conversation and with follow-up conversations with each and every one of you. Some of you responded, some phone calls, some emails. I wanted to put it all in one place for us to see where we are. We have some themes to help guide us into making a decision on next steps. So I'm just going to high level walk through these to start the conversation. Themes that I heard, everyone wants all the committee rooms to be in the building and not spread out. That was a big piece of feedback right off the top. Members wanted renovations to be done in phases, so there wasn't a lot of disruption in the building, and that we could do this in a sort of a over the years and thoughtfully moving across the building and what needed to be done. Members also said we should be talking about the long term and not having our decisions just be based on ARPA money, but what our needs are in the building and what that looks like. We also have two other buildings, the Aiken buildings, as I fondly refer to them, as other properties and places that we can use for our work. And we haven't had a conversation about how those buildings fit into our planning and how we work here. And so lastly, there is clarity on what our immediate needs are, but less clarity on the long-term needs, right? Those were some of my high-level takeaways. And so what I think we'll do is I'll just walk through these next steps, and then we can regroup and start a conversation from my ideas based on what I heard from you. So what I heard is that let's start moving with the ADA compliance and the west entrance construction and planning. So those were I know there were several scenarios, so I just started to pull through and put on here what those look like. So the northwest entranceway, the egress.
Northwest is
That's the loading dock.
loading dock. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yes, so the loading dock entrance. So basically addressing the ADA compliance concerns and the entrance as our first step in the process. And then our next step, so the goal would be to get those plans in the works and moving while we have a larger conversation about what the next steps are for renovation. So we heard some of the feedback in the last presentation about some of the conversations with members in the building. But it seems like with this scale of a project, we really need a more robust conversation from the public, from people who come and visit this building, from staff, from members. It seems like this does not feel to me as the right space with a few members making this decision. And I really want to hear from Vermonters about what they see for the People's House for the expansion. I get all the requests to use the chamber, and the requests to use the chamber just through the roof. We are the meeting place now in Montpelier. And so there are other needs that I think we're going to need to address due to the flooding as well. And so I would propose that we work on a group of people that would run this engagement process. That would include the Friends of the State House, the curator, some members of this committee, and others who are interested. And then they could do the work to engage the public and get feedback and then bring it back to us when we're in session so that we can have the conversation in the context of the committee room on next steps. So that's my high level. This is what I heard from you and just a place for us to start the conversation today. So I would just start by saying, what's members' reaction and what are we missing? Does this feel right? We'll start with Senator Baruch.
Thanks, Jill. So just to clarify on your proposal, which sounds workable, we would be talking about initiating and completing design and construction of that phase one egress, ingress on the northwest and northeast. And that might take a couple of years to finish. And then we would be thinking of this public process as informing something that might be done after that point. So we'd be thinking more than a couple of years down the road.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Representative Wood?
Thank you. And you may have said this, but I just wanted to make sure that in that broadened public information process that we are thinking about additional input from members, both in the House and the Senate, in terms of how the building is used.
Yes, absolutely. I would really try to have a comprehensive list of those who work within this building, even the tour guides. I think that we all have our different ways that we work in this building and the paths that we take. Some of us spend more time on one floor than another floor, and it's important that we're getting everyone's perspective as we work and welcome people in this building. Absolutely, yes. Thank you. Senator Brock?
I'm afraid I must have a minority view since I'm in the minority.
I want to hear it.
After our last meeting, I thought a lot about the discussion, and I thought particularly about the numbers that were bandied about. I had a very lengthy conversation with Commissioner Fish regarding space in the Montpelier area generally. And I sought to think about the observations I've had over the past months, past year, more than a year, walking around the area. And in particular, walking into buildings that are occupied by state employees in theory, and to find them basically empty multiple days of the week. Now, I realize that the General Assembly is its own body and it doesn't intrude on the administration space and vice versa. But the first question I had was, how much consultation has there been with the administration regarding the use of those spaces that are managed by the administration somewhere in the general vicinity of the State House? Second, I know that there is a tunnel that goes from 133 almost under the State House and goes over to the pavilion. And I wondered whether or not some sort of a connector that would go up into the State House might in fact make sense if the various parties got together. Now, I understand that they're planning to close that down at least temporarily and maybe permanently because of potential flooding, but it doesn't flood every day. And the ability to get from one place to the other just strikes me as something to think about. I don't know how much we've thought about the fact that our space needs have changed, not just for the General Assembly, but for the rest of state government materially after the pandemic, and are likely to continue to stay changed in one shape or form. We have places, we have agencies that operate perhaps a day a week or 2 days a week with people in the office, and the rest of the time people are working remotely. Is that space wasted during all of that time? And are we talking about spending $38 million or up to $38 million to expand the State House? And then I think about the public. We just had a major flood, an earth-shattering flood. It's going to take a huge amount of money to fix. I'm not sure the public is going to be real enthusiastic about us getting additional committee rooms as opposed to using that money to deal with people and businesses that have suffered because of the flood. And even though those funds may not be used for that purpose, the optics of this are awful. And so I've got real concerns about what we're doing and whether or not we have involved enough people, particularly whether we've involved the administration sufficiently, whether or not we've come to the ability to come to any consensus about using space that really isn't being used or isn't being used effectively or isn't being used thoroughly. And I just have real concerns about what we're talking about doing. The number of people in the General Assembly hasn't changed. The number of people visiting the building probably hasn't changed. If anything, less people are viewing because they can now view our sessions remotely, which they couldn't do before. So again, I just have real cautions about this entire project.
No, I appreciate your comments, Senator. I think we are somewhat on the same page of saying, here are some immediate needs in terms of ADA compliance that we just need to get done. And then have a broader conversation about what does an expansion look like? And that's where I agree. We need more people to be involved in figuring out what our needs are and what it looks like. And so what we are talking about right here is what is the next step doing this in phases? And it would only be that focus on ADA compliance and that west entrance to get us started. So it would not be the number that you said. I'm not the expert on the numbers here, but I think it would be covered by ARPA money that we have already. And in terms of working with the administration, I would want them to be part of this larger process about what it looks like. And, the one thing that we did here is that we want committee rooms to stay in the building. So how did that impact if we need more meeting space? What does that look like? And our understanding is that the pavilion building will be open to us to continue to meet in those meeting rooms on the second floor, which is great. But I welcome that conversation with the administration for sure. And we can follow up on that. I brought Janet up here just in case there are other points that you want to speak to, Janet, not to put you on the spot, but I know you've been deep in this.
So Senator Brock, there has been many conversations regarding the tunnel through the years. And my understanding is because we sit on so much rock that I think it would be determined to be able to do that. Blasting to do it would make the State House proper vulnerable to blasting. Am I right, David and Tricia?
Yes.
Okay. So probably that's not going to be an option, but of course, I'm not an expert on that. That's just what
Very expensive option.
in a very expensive option.
And the tunnel is actually not close to the State House. It's halfway down the slope. And then at the flattest part of the State House lawn is where it goes across. So it is not anywhere near the ledge that the rest of the building rests upon.
And I would just like to add, as far as the west entrance goes and accessibility, so if we all know coming in that door right now with all the scaffolding that we put up every year is really, it's not a good way to do it. And every year that costs to put that scaffolding up, costs to take that scaffolding down. So that, I'm not sure the cost of it, but I think we could get somewhere a little bit better, save that money, put it towards part of the new entryway.
Yeah, thank you.
Just, the State House, annex buildings, I'll call them, were better. But there are several spaces that, Trisha Harper, sorry, architect,
Trish, do you want mind coming up so they can't see you?
okay.
If you could say your name for the record.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're.
Trisha Harper, architect for the State House, advising, I guess. So basically, I wanted to point out, though, that the ancillary buildings, Senator, to the State House are being looked at. And as the speaker just mentioned, I had done a review to use 109 and in creating that into many functional spaces where you could have groups of 50 or less, and then one big area where you could have 100 people in. To Governor Aiken is winding up as far as there's 18 office spaces approximately over there for people to have and to sit in, and that has been reviewed, and it's just it's just policy as far as how to fill them. And then the Governor Aiken is also being utilized this year. And that will be utilized for IT storage, IT training, and upstairs would be.
Capitol Police Space.
And then caucus.
We may have a meeting space room available over there too.
Yeah. So we're trying to utilize all those spaces that were made available for the State House legislative use, including 9 Baldwin. I didn't put that in because 133, I don't even know if we're even going to utilize that space anymore.
Due to the flooding.
Due to the flooding.
Okay. Senator Brock, do you have any follow-up questions, or they've touched on a couple of the points you brought up?
No, I think those points are all very helpful for us to consider, but one of my concerns is how well we've considered this, or are we basically on a train to expand the State House without doing the due diligence necessary to say, have there been enough changes, and are there likely to be changes that will be permanent? I still go through buildings around here, and 120 across the street, the DMV building's on it, and I see large amounts of basically empty space almost all the time. And that is a concern to me when we talk about adding additional space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. Senator Hashim and then Baruch.
Thank you. I think, I know there's a consensus that we want to keep all the committees in the same space or the same building. But, I do think there's a difference between talking about being within a 5-minute walk of the State House versus being within a 5-minute drive. I mean, personally, I wouldn't mind if my committee was in the pavilion and it was just a 5-minute walk between buildings. And it might be worthwhile to consult with the chairs of committees to see which committees would be fine with being within a 5 or 10-minute walk of the State House. Just something to think about.
Yeah, thank you. Senator Baruch.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Randy because I think those considerations all make very good sense. But I think what the chair is proposing and what I know I've discussed with Senator Kitchell, among others, is number one, as a minimal response. So it's what we need to do now for ADA compliance. It's not putting together new committee space or any of the other things that were on options 2 through 4. Those are deferred to another discussion. So I think the question of, do we have sufficient space in the existing campus is a fair one. We're just deferring it and saying that for right now, we'll limit, should we all agree on this, we'll limit what we're proposing to design, build, and pay for to those ADA compliant bathrooms and entrances, with the others to come in years following, if that's the decision at the end of that longer process.
Correct. Yep. Okay, thank you. So I see Representative Wood and then Senator Kitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, I guess, want to go on the record as stating unequivocally that we need to do ADA accessible renovations to the State House. Trying to assist people into the State House in through essentially what's the back door is not very respectful of individuals who require mobility assistance, and I think I have wholehearted support for doing the renovations that increase ADA accessibility to the building in a more respectful way than what is currently what currently happens. So and I feel like that the process that has been outlined by the chair is a process that involves the public. It involves looking at unused space, as Senator Brock said, and doesn't necessarily come to any foregone conclusions before we get there. That's the reason for doing the public process. So I just wanted to state that primarily with regard to the ADA accessibility.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Wood. Senator Kitchell.
Yes, some clarification. First of all, I agree with the ADA and really looking at those safety and issues. But I was wondering, it seems to me that we have got space within our campus, and certainly the Aiken buildings, that's a beautiful building over there that is very minimally used. So are you suggesting that I would want to really take a look at what we have now and move so that if in fact we can configure space within the State House, to bring the committee rooms here. I think there's a certain convenience. You've got the copy center, you've got some administrative support. And there's just a natural interchange between committees. It's hard when you see people trekking across the parking lot, for their committee in the pavilion. So I think that there's great benefit and utility to having the committees here. But my question is how space we're currently used here and what we might be able to reconfigure into committee rooms. And I sort of got the impression that we're talking about these sequentially, and I'm thinking we should be doing that concurrently so that any long-range plan is a long-range plan, but that we should make sure that we're fully maximizing and getting full utility for what we have right now, immediately available. So could you just clarify that that is part of the first step as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's clarity on what the priority is around the ADA compliance, that just needs to get done. Like, that is very clear. And that entrance is not a good entrance for public health and safety reasons. So those seem like the ones where there's consensus on, that we can get those plans in the works to move forward. And then we can have the broader conversation about space. There's been so many different plans that have come out of this building over the years on what a renovation could look like. Most members haven't seen the other spaces yet to know what they even look like, let alone how they would be useful for our work. And so I think it would be good to bring everyone together to say, this is what we're working with. Let's get feedback on what the needs are and see what that looks like. And that, I don't have the answer to that. I think that's what we need to discover and talk about together. Is that
Well,
helpful?
I would like I guess I just want to be clear that we would be looking at more immediate utilization of all the space that we have in our
Yeah,
I hear what she's saying.
on campus.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what was being referenced. So
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think, Tricia, maybe you could talk about what phase we're in now with this report.
Yes.
And what,
So we're in the programming phase, the first phase of design. And then, so the next, and part of this is that we need to develop this program further to meet what we're outlining here today. And I understand what Senator Kitchell's saying, that I feel strong about this too, that whatever is designed today doesn't include doing an addition or expansion in whatever
Yeah.
we can do in a future phase. So, that should be considered, and the language should be in there, because there is some things that are going on that I don't think that they were thoughtful for future addition in the HVAC work. And so that worries me. So I would like to, that language there so I can reinforce it a little.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that, Representative Shaw.
Thank you. So I just want to make a couple of statements and to get some clarity. I think, Madam Chair, you said that should this committee coalesce around phase one, which I would hope we would do with the utmost haste after conversations that I've had this summer with the Division of Fire Safety about safety aspects for the building and the people in the building. I can convey to you that they're on pins and needles as far as this building goes, because they know that we're pushing the limits on what they can and can't do for us. So I would hope that we could coalesce around that and coalesce around that with modifications as necessary fairly quickly. Madam Chair, I think you said there's enough money from ARPA funds to do phase one currently. Did I hear that correctly?
There's only, there's 150 million that is being allocated for planning.
150.
No, I said the wrong amount, 1.5.
My reaction there for a second. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
But there is another 150,000 that has been appropriated
Right.
for, the 3D modeling of the State House was just done. And then in other means.
So we're considerably short of the 11 or so million dollars that phase one
Would be 11 million.
The 11 could be 15, could be 8.
It could, yeah, because we're still in programming. So we know that it's somewhere, depends on what we do.
There is the consideration of the financial aspect and
Sure.
that type of funding where we can get that fund. But if we make a decision, then we could talk about dollars, which I think we could do that anyway. I think from my experience during COVID and being on I can't remember the name of the committee, but it was what we were going to do with the State House during COVID. We talked to everybody and beyond, the folks that were using this building. And where could we move you? Would you have to stay in the building? All those questions that we'll be asking again. And we received unbelievable pushback from staff. The staff had to be in this building. And I think we need to revisit that and understand, not under the pressure of COVID, but understand what we really would like and would ask our staff to do. That's going to be part of your discussion on getting people in and talking about it. And we need to be prepared for pushback from just about everybody that we're touching this building. And so that's going to take some time. That's why I think it makes sense to go to the safety issue of the building. I think everybody can agree on it in some form. Knowing that we can key phase one in any future projects that may or may not be happening with this building. I think we had a reassurance from Richard Freeman at the last meeting that we could do that. We also need, as a committee, there were some questions that you asked, Madam Speaker, about how we're going to use the building and what size of the committee rooms under the current configuration. I think this committee needs to build policy based on those type of discussions that we can have in place going forward. And then we still have the problem of how we're going to look during the upcoming session with potentially maybe yes or no using pavilion or 133. That hopefully we can get back in those buildings in some form. But I think that policy has to be derived and that the policy I think will drive the building in this particular case. And as Senator Brock has said, are we beyond the scope? Are we beyond the cooperative efforts of the legislature and administration about using buildings that we do or don't control? And it's time to have that discussion for buildings that are, especially buildings that are under use. So I think beyond just the construction of where we're going for a phase to maybe kick us off, we need to do this really serious look and have a serious conversation on what the future looks like or what we think the future looks like. And we'll glean some of that from if we have some hearings of folks that will be here. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we're really respectful to the building as we move forward. I think that's for me, and I'm sure it is for you, Tricia, and for others, and that how important this building is to all of us. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So I just I think this was a conversation that started in, committees. We've been talking about this building. We've invested in the HVAC system. And my understanding is we did not want the State House next step conversation to end with session ending, and that there was some work being done to keep looking at what is the next step or what is the next phase. And so I think this might be a very clear need that we have, that we can get this to the next phase of project development. Well, we do have this larger conversation and answer those questions. Senator Brock, I think I saw your hand.
Just a comment that this is a larger discussion than the State House expansion for committee rooms, et cetera. It is a fundamental rework of the way people do work of an administrative and office nature. And we need to look more broadly and think of, do we need a department to occupy a full floor of an office in which only the staff is there 1 or 2 days a week, or 2 or 3 people are there and the rest are out most of the week? This rework may cause us to think about using space in a more collaborative way than we do right now, in which we say, this is your space and this is his space and this is somebody else's space. And that is a thought process that this is the time to do it before we spend a bunch of money.
Yeah. I totally hear you. And I think I said this at the top, but I believe that we will be able to continue to use the meeting rooms in the pavilion when we get back in January, which will be great. And so we will continue that structure and setup.
I just want to pick up on something Rep. Shaw said, and that is the historical integrity. Because one of the questions we had, and we know that there are limitations of the chambers. But rather than do anything detrimental to we adapt if we need to. That's my view. I just think that, I don't know what the other responses were, but I think we got testimony that in fact, like if you went to a certain amount of square footage per person, the House chamber couldn't meet any of that. But unless you want to shrink the chamber, which I don't think is within the purview of this committee.
It is not.
Then I guess I don't know. It wasn't one of the talking points, and you really did a great job. But I think that if there's one of the principles, it's making sure that we're respecting the integrity and the historical preservation. And so if we had COVID again, we know how to work differently. And I would say we adapt, rather than dramatically alter that, that historic legacy here that we've got in the State House. And that wasn't on your talking points, and I don't know if that was a theme that came through or not, but I just want to echo what
Sure.
Rick Shaw said about that as
Yeah,
well.
and I think that goes to the point about keeping the committee, that we heard people wanted to keep the committee rooms here in the building. And some members did mention that they did not want any changes to the chamber. So I think the historic integrity of the building and how that looks will be a key factor in this conversation, and then that conversation about the future. For sure. I'll look to Janet and Tricia. Is there anything that we have not talked about that you think we should be considering? Because I think we're honing in on a direction here.
The one thing that Freeman was looking to receive from this group based on the program and the future plans for the committee rooms is if it would be acceptable, which when the committee, after hearing what everybody was saying, I think it would be acceptable to live with 20 square feet per person on regular non-pandemic events or health events. And then it would be, the signage would go up in the room, the capacity sign, wherever it is, would go up and say, no, you can't put, it's 30 square feet per person, maximum capacity. Whatever that is, at 30 square feet is, so that would answer that.
20.
And they're looking for, your approval on that. That was one question they asked. But what I heard Representative Nader say was that
Senator.
Senator, that about the committee rooms and we've studied many times reviewing, getting people out, moving committee rooms out elsewhere. And the committee's changed so much. So maybe you're able to move that committee this year, but a few years from now you won't, because they can't do it. Someone may be too impaired to go over or whatever it is. But that is key to this committee. Do you want to stay in as we proceed forward, are we staying in the building, or do you really want to review other locations and would be amendable to moving committees out of the building? So there's another.
Committees or other functions. I think that part of.
Okay.
I think that needs to be part of it, because obviously joint fiscal is in another building. Some of the Ledge Council is Pink Lady, Human Resources isn't. So I think we have administrative support pieces. So what I would not just want to limit it to looking at committees, but any of those functions.
Other functions beyond, but the committees are the hard factor now, trying to get them squeezed into the building, the existing building, based on that, wanting more space per person. And not utilizing those 4 center committee rooms upstairs, or 5 or whatever, but it's in the annex. So anyway, that's something, sure, yeah, but we need further the study or just something, a response back from this group to know what direction they should proceed and how you feel. And then I just wanted to address what Senator Brock was saying about the Capitol complex and the space use. I know that there's been several studies done on that over the years, and I agree. There's a huge change in the way we function. I'm working from home now too, and how the need for space within the complex, and that update, that's a separate kind of item. I find that Capitol complex space use should be updated. And I'm not sure when it was last updated, a couple of years ago, but it's changed in the last two or 3 years, our perception of how we work.
Yeah.
So, and it's obvious what spaces are being used now. And I'm not sure what Commissioner Fitch said about that or whatever, but it's, I think that is, can be melded into this, but it's separate, because if at this point. So, because we have our annex spaces, we know what they are and how we could utilize those.
Janet, and then I'll go to Senator Bree.
So I think what Senator Kitchell was saying, so in this next phase of development, that was a very important piece. They wanted to know the 20 feet versus 30. But I think they were also looking for input, like what else do you want? And if we would tell them that we'd like to see a design maybe for other spaces that could be utilized within the State House that wasn't a committee room, maybe they could give us something like that. Would this be the appropriate time to ask for that?
For how other spaces could be used?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be, but I think that they've done that. That's part of this program and development. And we can ask them again to.
Right. I mean, I think that's clear that we'd like to see what that is.
Yeah. Senator Bree.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a couple of things about space. So my sense, if we're limiting ourselves to option one, and we haven't obviously voted on that, but if that turns out to be the case, then the question of square footage per person isn't so much at issue anymore, because we're not in that COVID pandemic mind frame or trying to design with that as the basis. So it seems like that's a question that could be deferred along with the other questions, since we're only doing the ADA compliance. The other thing is, I wouldn't want, my understanding is still that as quickly as possible, the public rooms in the State House, rooms 10 and 11, are going to be returned to general use and will not be committee rooms anymore once the HVAC system is set up. If that's not the case, then something's changed. So I'd like to be just reassured that that is still our plan in the immediate aftermath of finishing the HVAC update, is that everyone in the State House will have access to rooms 10 and 11 again.
So I'll work backwards. Well, I'll do the 20. Let's do the 20 last, because I know that's, I think, Tricia, you had some thoughts on that. So just to reiterate again, so we're all clear, the HVAC system will not be complete in January. So that means that it is like, we will be in the same setup for 24, but we are hopeful that in 25, we are able to go back and have some more meeting rooms, but the system is not complete. So it's, from a public health perspective, it wouldn't be safe for us to go back in January. And so, well, hopefully things will keep on moving and we can have the change in 25. So I think, does that answer your question on that, Senator Brew?
It does. That was my understanding, that
Yeah.
because of supply chain issues, we had slipped to 25, but I just want to make sure we're not making a decision here, for instance, on the 20 square feet, that all of a sudden turns into House committees need to retain rooms 10 and 11.
Can you speak to that?
Yes. Okay. So the House committee rooms they currently are, Senator, they're not ADA accessible. So with the capacity, people that are entering them, and you could limit capacity in those rooms so that they are more accessible and then people can be in there. Also, the rooms are, the air is being increased or changed and things like that. But there are codes per square feet per person per room. And those codes, have been at their edge, and that's why we need to do these HVAC renovations, and that's why people aren't in those middle committee rooms, because they're too small to function with that air.
Yeah.
So when we return the air back, those committee rooms they don't fit in there anymore. Most of them are larger, or.
If that's the case, then that is a material difference from what we've operated on for the last couple of years. The understanding has always been that rooms 10 and 11 would be returned to general use. If the House committees, for any reason, cannot use them, then our previous discussion about other buildings becomes operative. I think that rather than everyone being disadvantaged and having a 12-member committee in a very, very large public room, that we find a room in one of the other buildings that committee then meets in. So I'm just trying to make clear that the Senate has not signed off on any plan that will allow the House to retain possession of rooms 10 and 11 post HVAC work.
Let me try framing this another way, because we all want this space to work for everyone. I think I hear what you're saying, Senator. So let me see if asking it this way is the same question, but just phrased differently. How does the decision about 20 feet or whatever, but how is that needed for what we've been talking about for phase one?
Phase one, not necessary.
Not necessary.
Phase
Okay.
two, and understanding the egress out of those rooms and, how the function and circulation is going to, we want to, as Senator Kitchell was saying, we want to be cognizant and aware that whatever addition we're going to do, phase two, whenever we could do it, or in modifications to these rooms, that we could move forward in that direction, not for it to be precluded by saying that we're not going to look at you.
Yes. So we can say that decision about 20 is actually part of the larger conversation about what we look like in the future. But for now, if there's one project that we can get going to address concerns, it's around the ADA compliance in the entrance. And so I would say that conversation will happen about the 20 and the rooms. But for now, what I hope we can agree on is that it makes sense to just move to the next phase of this project with ADA compliance and the entrance. And fire, and then we can have this larger conversation about the needs of the building.
Correct.
Does that go to Senator Baruch? Are you?
It mostly does, but to go back to Senator Kitchell's point about there being option one, then further out, there's this larger discussion of which the 20 square feet will be a part. But in the interim, in the immediate sense, we should be thinking about what space we have available right now. If what I'm hearing from the architect is that she has concerns that the traditional house committee rooms will not work according to ADA, and that I don't want to have the HVAC system be signed off on, and then suddenly, well, there are ADA concerns, so the house will retain rooms 10 and 11. So rooms 10 and 11, to my understanding, are in the temporary possession of those house committees. When the HVAC is done, they'll be returned to use by House and Senate. And if something else needs to happen with those committees, then I think, as Senator Kitchell notes, we should be working on those questions now with available space.
Senator, the Representative Shaw.
Thank you.
Hi.
So,
All right.
so for Trish, does the 20, a lack of decision on a 20 square foot cause the architects concerned in their design of the future? In other words, are they working on something now that they need that information for?
Well, they're waiting for our response.
Okay.
So yes, that's all part of the understanding what the base program is going to be for the current and the future.
So should we decide on option one, they will move from that option to looking at the next piece of the puzzle. And by that time, they're going to need to know what our thoughts were on the 20 or 30 square feet or 60 square feet.
Well, I think that they were looking at everything, they are.
As a whole.
As a whole, right? So they had presented us with many options originally. We thought that was too much for the committee, so we dropped it. But anyway, and so they have presented these options of what level of funding spending was palatable for additions and things like that. I think holding off on saying it is, I'm not sure what the catch is, because I think the 20 square feet is,
Standard.
yeah, or, a classroom is 15 square feet. So, that's what I use for the code for, and then 20, because,
So the architect is looking at this project as whole, not as piece by piece by piece. They're looking at it, I think what you said, they're looking at it as a whole.
We should look at it as a whole.
What we decide.
That's right.
Put it back together as we move further.
Right. Because, go ahead.
I think some middle ground there, Senator Baruth. So there's a possibility, like the rooms in the 30s, that if we were able to knock out a wall, and rooms that we aren't using in the middle could go with the room on a corner and make that room bigger, which would allow for more people in it.
Right.
Right. So perhaps something like appropriations then could fit in that room.
House appropriation.
But
We are not moving appropriation.
Some around with existing spaces with some modification. No, but, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying and trying to just make clear here, like, 'cause we're making sure we're all speaking the same language, right? And we're on the same page. And so I think we have, for us, we're so used to doing things in phases and like this is the first step and the second step. And in their eyes, they're seeing it as one comprehensive plan. And we're just saying, hey, the rest is coming, but for now, we need to keep this moving with what our immediate needs are, and we want to focus on those. And that's what we're here to work on.
And again, it goes back to, even planning for you have to have a master plan. You have to have something that you're going for. If you take it in pieces, then it's going to be piecemealed.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So that is what we're looking for. We're looking at a general overall scope, what direction you think the building should move in the next 20, 30 years, whatever it is, and how it is in post-pandemic times. But at this point, we need to address the accessibility, the entry, and some code, the fire egress out of this room. We're in room 9 now. In the corner of this room, we're looking at putting in the fire egress from the Senate chamber. So as part of this project too. So I didn't want that to be.
Yeah.
And then the thought is also to infill the courtyard to the arch if possible. And is that precluded in this discussion? Because that's too far, so that there's more space for circulation. And
my hope for next steps here is to give the direction to say, okay, these are the immediate needs that we want to address. Can you put that in more detail for us to work on and keep moving? And go from there, because I'm sure there will be more smaller or things that will come up that we haven't talked about, but we could get that part moving and bring them back with that plan.
And that can be done without in any way compromising anything we would do longer term. And
that's correct.
Your proposal is.
Yeah.
Just to be sure.
I just want to give a chance. We do have the chairs of the committees here, Representative Emmons, Senator Ingalls. Is there anything that you'd like to add or share as part of this conversation? You are members of this committee for this. Want you to feel included in part of it.
Well, I'll speak up a little bit. This is I've heard this conversation, I think, for the last 2 years. So I've just sat back and listened because I've heard it so many times and just the same format. I think the first thing we need to do is go forward with the ADA and accessibility into the building, and to ask Freeman to come back with design documents. The language in the Capitol bill was hoping they'd be back with some schematic design come November. So I think we need to be very, very clear what they need to be designing. And also, I think it's really important to look at it in context. We do an expansion to keep that as well in the picture when we do design for a new entryway or ADA. And I appreciate what Senator Kitchell said, that let's go forward with it, but also let's keep in mind that there may need to be some internal structures to accommodate a larger part of the building down the road, and that we don't have to go back and redo an entryway or an ADA accessible part into the building. So I would agree to look at that and then look at it in phases and really start for the bigger picture of how we go forward with space and expansion of the State House to really reach out to partners and reach out to the public and hear as many voices as possible. And I would support that approach.
I think as far as the ADA compliancy is, it's a no-brainer as far as that. If we're asking other buildings across the state to provide for this type of access, that for us not to be there, just really, you want to talk about optics, that doesn't look really, really well. And I would also say, and I'm going to be very cautious about how far I jump into this, I also say as far as the space requirements, that if we get to further phases within this building, is to make sure that we're not being grander than what the public's being as well, and a lot of other areas. And I think it's very important as chair of institutions that I don't get much deeper than much of that, because I think it's very important that I keep an open mind all the way through as far as things come, and look at it all and try to work with everybody. But with that being said, it's always, for me, it's always going to be about the money. Now, if we could get Tricia to give us back our 150 million, well, then we just don't have a problem anymore. But as far as anything else, that's what it'll get down to me. So those are my comments.
Thank you. All right, well, this has been, I knew it would be a good, robust conversation. And so I think the next step would be to, if you, Jen and Tricia, could go back to Freeman French Freeman. And if we can get back to us what this, what the design would look like what are those things, just to make sure that we are all fully on the same page on what that looks like. And then that'll give us something in front of us to react to with more meat on the bones. Does that sound good with everyone? I'm seeing head shaking. Yes, yes, great. All right. Is there anything else any member would like to add before we wrap up this part of the agenda? Nope, not seeing any hands. Great. Thank you. I really appreciate your feedback and your thoughts on this. And we will keep you posted to see how long this would take to get back to us, and we'll get a meeting on the books to continue this conversation. The last item on our agenda here, and thank you, Representative Emmons, and Senator, you're obviously welcome to stay if you want. It's up to you.
Thank you. I am at the beach in Maine, so I am going to go continue my vacation.
Enjoy. We're very happy for you.
Good weather.
Yes, it's perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you. All right, committee members. So you should have received an email from Jen Carby about her transition and the next steps for our process for hiring a new head of legislative council. I'm so grateful, so incredibly grateful for Jen's work. She has just been a rock star. If you may recall, when she first took the job as Director of Legislative Council, she kept her healthcare portfolio as well and did 2 jobs at once, which was a huge lift, especially given new to the role. And so she's been a tremendous asset to us in the branch, and thankfully she's on vacation right now. So I'm happy that is happening. It is now time for us to start the hiring process and come up with next steps. And so those would be forming a small committee of members of Jlmc committee to be part of the hiring committee. And we will follow very much how we ran the process a couple of years ago when the job was open, with having an interview committee from Jlmc and mirroring a process to get staff feedback and involvement as well, because that is critical. And so we are looking to post the job description this week and to get the process started, and would love to open it up to anyone who is interested in serving on the committee. I will absolutely be serving on it as chair. And curious if there are others that would be willing. Senator Hashim?
Yeah, I would be happy to serve on that subcommittee if no one else is interested.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so we have myself, Senator Hashim, and Representative Shaw. Okay. Any others? And Senator Kitchell. Great. All right, so what we will do moving forward, I will reach out to you once we have a first round of interviews and we can outline the process again so we're all on the same page. I appreciate your help and support in serving on this subcommittee. And again, very grateful to Jen for staying on in this role until it is hired.
I just realized I'm going to be gone from November 10th through Thanksgiving weekend. Maybe you don't want me.
I think is this something you would not be available for Zoom? I'm presuming.
I'm in Paris and Barcelona.
I'm very happy. I think that might be a conflict, unfortunately.
I take my hand down.
You're taking your hand down. Representative Wood?
We need another senator.
Yeah.
Did you call on me, Madam Chair?
Yes, I did. Go
Okay,
ahead, Representative Wood.
I'm not volunteering. I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah.
I'm just question in terms of the process. Will this subcommittee bring back like 2 finalists or the final, what you're recommending, or how does that process work? This first time I've been involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So the subcommittee will come back to Jlmc with the recommendation.
So Jill,
Yes, yep.
would it be all right for Ashley to sit on this?
As a designee for you?
Yes.
Sure. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, let's do that then.
Okay. All right. So we have a group here. And again, we will be in communication with how the process is going. And if we need to have a meeting, just an executive session, if need be, to talk about hiring or whatever, we'll be in touch. This is a very important job and we want to get it right. And so we will keep you informed on how the process is going. And thank you to those who have offered to serve. So that gets us through our agenda. Are there any other items that a member wants to bring up or have recommendations for a future agenda item?
I do.
You do?
I do. So
Please.
are we going to discuss, as it becomes clearer what's available in space in the complex, how we're going to look like in January? And
Yeah.
what it's going to look like, surprisingly similar to
Right.
last year.
I think at this point, it's safe to say that because of the status of the HVAC system, there's not much room there's not any other options at this point.
And I get that.
Yeah.
And then I'd like to think about talking about future policy for future crises, pandemic or flood or famine or whatever that we want to think, and develop a policy that the legislature can use in the future that's flexible enough to accommodate that. So the responsibility is not all on the speaker and the pro tem.
Yeah.
Come up with these ideas a little later on.
Sure. So in the past, it has been the jurisdiction of the Joint Rules Committee to do that work. I believe we were assigned this interim project because of the sense of urgency in keeping this conversation going. And it didn't seem to fit neatly anywhere else in terms of what the building looks like in renovation. But the specific policy content about how we make those decisions actually does live in joint rules.
So we could guide joint rules.
Yeah. Right. So we could talk about what that looks like, if that's something that would make sense here, or if joint rules planning to meet to just confirm that this is the way we're going to be set up and potentially have that conversation. And I'm happy to talk with the chair, Senator Baruth, about that too, and move back with you.
Thank you.
Possibly something on the Capitol Police, got the interim, but they're going to be making recommendations, it seems like, and so perhaps we
Yeah.
could get an update
We will, absolutely.
at another meeting.
Yeah, yeah. It's great that to actually see him sitting here is really great, and that it's really important, and we will have him back when he starts to have some strategies and ideas. Yep, Senator Baruth.
Yeah, and to that point, if we could have updates on the two positions we greenlit last year or last session, and also the car, which we had greenlit up to $15,000, I think. So,
That'd be part of this recommendation.
yeah, just so we know where
Yeah.
those things stand.
Yeah, yeah, we can absolutely do that. So I'll find out from Janet how much time they need before they can come back with some clear recommendations, and we can fold that into a future meeting. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Giving members any other ideas? Okay. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned, and we'll work on scheduling our next meeting.